RotoGrinders Daily Fantasy Podcasts are presented to you by Yahoo Fantasy Sports. This week 15, you need to be checking out Yahoo. They've got a $1 million guaranteed prize pool tournament, which also has the greatest value proposition in the history of DFS. $250,000 in guaranteed overlay in this contest. It's a $20 entry with only a 10 entry max. If you haven't signed up, make sure you go to rotogrinders.com/Yahoo and use promo code Grinders30 for a $30 matching deposit bonus on that first deposit. Check them out this week. It's Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pro Football Focus Show. I'm your host, Travis Mangone. I'm not Britt Devine. He is busy in the Magic Kingdom. We got a little screenshot of that before the show of Britt and Magic Kingdom. So he's having a blast there. They decided to call me in, not Dan Bach. He did it the last time. We got 3 beards this time. So this should be a really powerful show. We'll kick it off with Tyler over there. How's it going over there, my man?
Feeling pretty good. Ready to get Week 15 underway. We were talking about it before we started recording, but it's a pretty ugly 11-game slate. We're going to have to try to pick our battles here.
Yeah, my take is this is the worst 11-game slate. Like, I started going through the games on, I believe, today, and I kind of was talking with someone about it, and I said, I'm going to just name the games for you and tell me, like, stop when you hear something you like. And he didn't stop till Pittsburgh and the Patriots. It's a really nasty slate. I know someone who likes Pittsburgh Patriots. Scott, how about you? What are you doing with that game?
Yeah, I do like it. You know, it's 5 points. Their over-under is 5 points ahead of the next closest game on this slate. But we could talk about that a little bit later. Britt, what's going on here? Who takes 2 vacations during football season and then goes to the same place? I don't know. He must really like the little teacup ride or something. But, I feel betrayed and hurt. So let's make this the best episode of this podcast yet.
I'm down. Dude, Britt is in love, man. Like, you can see it in the eyes. Like, someone that goes to Disney twice in 1 year during football season, you're totally in love. Am I right, Tyler?
You know he's not picking that vacation spot.
Oh, 100%. But as long as there's food there, you know Britt's all in on that place.
That's right.
What do you think, Tyler? Totally in love and just wants to eat all the food there and keep the girl happy?
Yep. He's just doing what he's got to do.
Yeah, man, I totally want to leak that picture he sent to us on Twitter. I totally want to leak that on Twitter so everyone can see it, but I'm not going to do that to Britt. He's enjoying himself in Disney, though. Hope he has a fun vacation and maybe he can chip some more money when he plays a couple lineups, I'm sure, while he's there. But let's kind of, before we dive in, let's talk about the FanDuel single entry series. I know you guys will probably be in it. I'm definitely in it. This thing ends on Sunday. It's your top 4 scores count, 3 buy-in tiers. $20,000 prize pool is the online final, right? So I believe it's like maybe a $3 or $5 entry fee for the first one. Then there's like a $30 one and there's a $100 one. You can enter all those. I enter them all every single week. Scores haven't been the best, but maybe I can strike big on this last week. Join here. You can check it out in Smartwater's post on the RotoGrinders forum for details on how to participate. Check that out over there. But guys, let's dive in on this slate because it's not pretty. I don't know, much to talk about. Like, normally at this point in the week, I kind of have some plays I actually like, but man, there's not too much that I like so far. But we'll dive in and we'll talk to you first, Tyler. At quarterback, let's talk about your favorite guy. And your favorite one is Andrew Luck, and for good reason. He's been phenomenal all season long. It seems like this is the game that if you kind of cross off the Pittsburgh Patriots game, say it wasn't on the slate, this seems like the game that I would probably gravitate towards the most. It's in a dome as well. So kind of talk about Luck for me, Tyler.
Yeah, it's surprising that like a game total of 47 here, it doesn't sound that enticing considering there's 11 games on the slate, but it's actually the second highest scoring total on the main slate, which is going to set the mood for this week pretty much. This Indianapolis-Dallas game is one that has the potential to hit the over, though. Luck has thrown for multiple touchdowns in 9 of his last 10 games, averaging over 25 DK points during that span. Dallas has strong perimeter corners and a quality pass rush, but I think Luck and the Colts can negate that with their offensive line and with him peppering his tight ends underneath quite often. He's a guy that I kind of gravitated towards immediately on Monday, and I think I'm going to stick with him so far this week.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense. One thing I saw Evan Silva say, which I thought was pretty sharp, he kind of tweeted out like when games are close, like what teams are passing more. And Andrew Luck is one of those, like in the Colts. Like they are passing a ton when the games are close. I forget what the tweet is. Go check out his Twitter. It's probably posted somewhere on there. But I do think if this game is close, which it should be, there should be a lot of passing on their end. And I think Luck is a really good play. What about you? What about you, Tyler? What are you doing with your top end quarterbacks?
Scott, you mean? Yeah.
Sorry, Scott. Oh, man.
That's okay. I'm going to play Ben Roethlisberger. I think it's, pretty easy. I know he's going to be chalky, but I'm okay with that. He's home this week. Since 2014, he averages 24.2 fantasy points per game at home. Over that same 77-game sample, when he's banged up, when he's on the injury report, he's still averaging 25.7 fantasy points per game. That's across 6 games. We know he'll play when he's banged up and play well. So I'm not too worried about the ribs injury. New England ranks second worst in schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. I kind of like that James Conner is unlikely to play. Jalen Samuels had more receptions than rushing attempts in college, and I think we're going to see Roethlisberger just sort of soak up these free fantasy points, targeting Samuels on short passes as a extension of the running game. Plus, I feel confident about who I want to stack him with. So, I like Big Ben quite a bit.
Yeah, I think the beauty of this too is that I know this is like the most wonky thing ever, but right, Big Ben's not on the road. He's not in that 1 o'clock game. He's in the quote unquote prime time game, right? It's the 4:25 game that everyone will be tuning in on. Big Ben always normally shows up in those spots, so should be a fun time. Let's kind of move on and talk about the value guys, and we'll go to you, Tyler. You got Lamar Jackson in there, and you got Marcus Mariota. I think the one I prefer the most is Lamar Jackson, but going up against the Bucs, that's kind of concerning because the Bucs D has gotten a little bit better. Talk about both those quarterbacks.
Yeah, they've definitely gotten a little better over the last couple of weeks. Getting healthy is a huge thing for them, where they were struggling with that for much of the year. But Lamar Jackson's rushing upside is something that's really hard to fade. He's rushed for 70-plus yards in each of his 4 starts, scoring twice on the ground. That floor makes him an enticing fantasy value this week, playing against the second lowest graded defense in the league by our metrics, and that's the Bucs. Tampa Bay is allowing the highest completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks, the second most passing touchdowns, the second highest yards per attempt, and the 4th most fantasy points to the position. So not only are we getting a ton of rushing production here with Jackson, he also has a cupcake matchup through the air. They have been getting a little bit better as of late, but it's still not enough for me to worry about him considering the amazing floor that he provides. This floor combined with his attractive passing matchup puts him squarely on the radar for cash for me, and I think he's my lock right now.
What about Mariota? Because he wasn't someone that was really on my radar here. I know the Giants obviously aren't that great of a defense, but they held Mark Sanchez to 0 points, and they had to bring in Jackson. So talk about Mariota.
Yeah, I was kind of like stretching for quarterback options here. It's really thin. I mean, we're having a lot of the main quarterbacks we like to pursue. They're not on this 11-game slate. Mariota's a guy I'm kind of, maybe in tournaments, I'm kind of interested in stacking with Corey Davis and maybe his tight end, Anthony Ferkser. But I just kind of like the idea of him on a game where they need to win and the Giants are playing for nothing. Like, I just see the Giants kind of giving up, running the ball with Saquon until they're afraid he gets injured, and just letting their backups play. I think the Titans, I think they're 7-6 right now or something like that. They need to win to continue to keep playing in the playoffs. And we've kind of just seen them take like almost a whole week off after letting Derrick Henry run for 200-plus yards last week. I'm excited to see this passing attack get back on track here against the Giants.
All right, now let me get this name right. It's Scott. I'm a first-time caller, long-time listener. I was just a little bit nervous. I listen to this show every week, so let's go to you, Scott. Talk about your mid-tier guys, because I think you got some interesting options that I'm excited about.
So I wrote up Dak, Lamar Jackson, Mitch Trubisky, Josh Allen, and then 2 sort of probably dumb contrarian plays. Of those 4 quarterbacks, Dak's been doing pretty well recently. He's mispriced a little bit. Lamar Jackson, obvious case. Tyler likes him too. Mitch Trubisky should see a bounce back game from him. But I think the toughest call of all these is the one I like the most right now. And that's Josh Allen. So he's our least efficient quarterback by passer rating this year. It doesn't matter. He leads all quarterbacks in fantasy points over the last 3 weeks, set a new record for rushing yards. He also ranks among all running backs 2nd in rushing yards and 5th in rushing fantasy points. over this span. That's just crazy. And I've talked about this before on this podcast. Being a prolific runner is basically a cheat code for fantasy, and it's really hard to avoid Josh Allen. I think we were talking Yahoo before the show. I think if I remember correctly, he's super cheap on Yahoo this week.
I think he is cheap there. He was, I believe, $23 last week, and I played him, so I'm sure it didn't go much up. Maybe it went up a buck or two. But, yeah, Josh Allen's a guy I wanted to pull the trigger on last week in cash. I didn't end up pulling the trigger. I went pretty heavy on Deshaun Watson. But you're right. It is a cheat code to play those quarterbacks. And I already see, looking at the RotoGrinders ownership on FanDuel specifically, Josh Allen's one of the highest, owned quarterbacks. So I really do like Josh Allen. Dak Prescott was another guy that I was kind of considering that I thought was a good play because you can get into that game. Do you like him a lot, Scott, or are you more on Allen?
I mean, as it stands, I'm probably on Allen, but, Dak makes a lot of sense because now we're seeing Zeke get Christian McCaffrey type target volume. So that's free fantasy points for Dak Prescott. He has I think 5 rushing touchdowns over his last 8 games, something like that. And, Indianapolis is going to put up points. So maybe Dallas can't really play their typical slow-paced, run-heavy style of football. Amari Cooper's addition to this game, it's looking like a new offense entirely. It's going to be a close call. Probably depends on whoever's the better value on both sides. But I did notice right off the bat that Dak was probably the most mispriced of the quarterbacks on DraftKings and FanDuel this week.
Yeah, there definitely felt like there was a mispricing there. We'll get to it. There's a mispricing on Amari Cooper too. A lot of these Dallas guys feel like they're going to have some ownership for sure this week. Let's kind of go to you, Tyler, and talk about some of your value quarterbacks. Kind of dive in and let me know who you like because you didn't have many guys you loved in the mid tier. Any value guys you want to play?
Yeah, it's a very thin week at the quarterback position. I'm still kind of diving into the quarterback position. It's normally one that I wait till the end of the week. And trying to gravitate more towards stacks. That's kind of how I pick my quarterback. But Jeff Driscoll's a guy I'd like to mention. This Cincinnati-Oakland game is one where I think it could hit the over. Both these defenses are pretty terrible, and we saw last week both offenses were able to hang with their opponents and put up some points. Maybe they both just have similar results this week where both offenses click, both defenses perform poorly. Driscoll isn't a guy that's been blowing it up lately, and I don't think it's on many people's radar, but I like the idea of playing him and maybe some Derek Carr as well in some Oakland-Cincinnati stacks.
Yeah, it is worth noting when you're talking tournaments and trying to stack up games, it's nice to get these teams that are non-divisional opponents, right? Because they don't know each other, and when they're bad defenses, they can obviously shoot out a ton. What about you, Scott? What are your kind of lower owned guys, or maybe I see you got some dumb contrarian stacks you got quote unquote in there, but let's see what you got for some of your stacks with the quarterbacks.
Yeah, so I like that Tyler had the stones to mention Jeff Driscoll, and he's not wrong at all. And we have to mention Derek Carr as well. If you don't love the Pittsburgh-New England game, a sort of contrarian game stack is going to be that Cincinnati-Oakland game, which is either going to be really good for fantasy because these are really two bad defenses, or really bad because these are also not really great offenses. But yeah, I mentioned 2 contrarian plays. I think this is a massive get-right spot for Kirk Cousins. And, we've seen teams rally before following the firing of an offensive coordinator. Cousins has shown this season he has tournament-winning upside. Based on target volume throughout the year and production, you could go with a Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen game stack, and nothing about that matchup is prohibitive. But my dumb contrarian play, that would be Aaron Rodgers in the worst possible matchup. But it is Aaron Rodgers, and I'd have to stack him with Tariq Cohen, who also has tournament-winning upside, but that is almost entirely based on if Chicago is trailing for a large portion of the game, and then also playing Randall Cobb or Devontae Adams, probably Adams. But yeah, I think there's a lot of quarterback plays this week, just like last week, with very few who stand out, except for me. Like I said, again, I do like this Pittsburgh-New England game.
Yeah, I will say this. You talk about Rodgers. I did when they played the first week. I did put some money when I heard Rodgers was hurt. I put some money on the Packers when they were plus 1,200. The second that I heard Rodgers winning, so I was like, this guy could rally it back. I'm a Packers fan. Gave me some rooting interest too, so that ended up working out well for me. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. I think the Rodgers thing is just totally contrarian there. You got anything else, Tyler? You want to move on to the running backs?
That's all I have for quarterback. We can move on to the next position.
All right, we'll go to you, Tyler, because you got two guys who are absolute studs, right? You got Barkley at the top, you got Zeke, and I think they're going to be cash game staples. They're going to be guys that I'm loading up in my lineups. What are you kind of doing with those two guys? Are they just, just clear and above everyone else?
Exactly, and they're both cash locks for me. Saquon, I don't care about the exorbitant price tag, whether he's running by defenders or hurdling over them. He's showing everyone that he's worth every DFS dollar. He has 4 straight 100-yard outings on the ground, scoring 30-plus DK points in 3 of his last 4. He is our number 1 graded running back on the season, ranks top 5 in yards after contact per attempt, missed tackles, breakaway percentage. Those are runs of 15-plus yards, and fantasy points per snap. Add in that he's also adding 7.2 targets per game, and there's little reason to try to fade Saquon. As far as Zeke, ever since the addition of Amari Cooper, this entire offense has opened up and has allowed them to become a team that is orchestrating very, very well. They're firing on all cylinders, and they're the team to beat now in the NFC East. He draws a favorable matchup here against the Colts. Should be one of the fastest-paced games of the week. Cowboys have been passing more since the Amari acquisition. They're top 13 in pass play percent since then, and the Colts are no slouch either in the passing department. They're ranking second. This uptick in overall play volume, I think, is going to benefit Zeke, who's already seeing a ton of volume. From weeks 1 through 10, he was seeing 22.6 touches per game. Over the last 4 weeks, he's at 32.5. That's absurd. I'm not fading any kind of 30 touchback whatsoever. I'm going to have heavy exposure in tournaments as well with him.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned Barkley. Was he worth the first round pick? I won't ask you that. We don't have hours to be here and debate that. But yeah, Zeke is the new CMC now, it feels like nowadays. Scott, talk about Zeke and all the other studs that you like here at the top because, man, Zeke just seems like he's too hard to get away from.
No, Zeke is an absolute must play. And despite his high price tag, he's actually one of my top 3 values on FanDuel. And that's because over his last 5 games, he's averaging 24 carries, 8 targets per game. Remember, targets are worth 1.8 times as much as a carry in PPR leagues. So this is arguably the best volume I've ever seen from anyone at any position over a 5-game sample. So I have to play him no matter what. Saquon, really close second. I'm going to beat myself up because, I said Sunday or Monday, here's what you do to win in DFS. You play 3, try your hardest to play 3 of Zeke, Gurley, McCaffrey, Saquon, and then just call it a day. You've mastered that position. But here I am hyping up at a similar price tag, but slightly better values. Joe Mixon and Leonard Fournette. Mixon's risky. He's been boomer bust all year. Volume has been hit or miss, but he's another guy who saw massive volume last week. What was it, 33 touches? I think they lean heavy on him again in an amazing matchup with a backup quarterback. And then Leonard Fournette is if I'm going chalky with the Pittsburgh New England game stack, maybe this is how I get some contrarian ownership. So Fournette's been in and out of games due to injury, suspension. He's only played 19 quarters this season and only 16 full quarters, but fine. Across these 19 quarters, he totals 97 expected fantasy points or 20.4 expected fantasy points per 4 quarters, which would rank behind only Todd Gurley in expected fantasy points per game. What does that mean? It just means only Todd Gurley is seeing better volume than Leonard Fournette has this season. He's 7-point favorites up against a Josh Johnson-led Washington team that since week 9 is giving up 30.5 fantasy points per game, 5.34 yards per carry to opposing running backs. If that's not worse, it's got to be in the bottom 3. So people are going to sleep on him, but he's one of my top plays of the week.
Man, I have not played Fournette all season. He felt like a guy I maybe wouldn't touch at all, but you're starting to sell me a little bit more on him here. Definitely think he's interesting. I also agree that I think, Joe Mixon is a pretty good play. Tyler, I think you think Joe Mixon's a good play too, it sounds like. So talk to me about him.
Yeah, I mean, Scott nailed it there. He was 6,400 last week. Now they lowered his price after a 27.8 DK outing, 6,100. I think he could be top 3 in ownership this week, to be honest. I don't know. The Raiders have allowed the second most rushing yards to opposing backs. 6 different backs have hit the century mark against them. Mixon's coming off a season high 26 carries with 6 targets. Definitely a guy that I want a lot of this week. And I'm all about the Fournette play as well. I love the idea of pairing him with his defense. I think that's a great correlation play that it's going to cost a little bit more if you pay up for defense. But, I mean, at this point in the season, we know what we're getting when we're facing the Redskins. That's worth it. Another guy I think that's worth playing price tiered down is Dalvin Cook. He's a player that I rarely ever recommend, but I think I'm jumping in this week here against Miami. Cook is seeing 67% of the running back touches over the past 4 weeks, 15 touches per game, 7-point home favorite here, taking on a Dolphins defense that has allowed 20-plus DK points to 8 different backs so far this year. Miami is allowing the 3rd most red zone trips per game, allowing a high touchdown equity for Dalvin here. I think there's plenty of chances for Cook and the Vikings here to score, given their 26-point implied total.
Yeah, it sounds like things are going well now for my Dalvin Cook season-long shares. They're finally going to pay off for the playoffs here. We'll have to see. But they did fire the offensive coordinator, too. They got that narrative there. It worked for the Packers. Maybe it works here for the Vikings. I've heard Mike Zimmer's been beating the drum of, we need to run more. We need to run more. So I think that's possible that could go down. You also have one more guy to mention, and I think we all are going to agree we like him. Got any interest in Jalen Samuels?
Yeah, we saw last week that they're not afraid to use him out of the backfield as a receiver, and I think they're going to do that quite often this week here with the Patriots. It really depends on Connor's status. It's up in the air right now. I heard he was walking around in the facility without any kind of limp, so it's something to monitor. But if he's not playing, Samuels is a guy I think you can play as a tremendous value.
Yeah, Scott, talk about Samuel, because you got him as like a lockish kind of guy for you, and he's one of those for me, someone I'm going to be getting a lot of exposure to in cash. And you love this Steelers game, so talk about Jalen Samuels.
Yeah, absolutely. So he played on 80% of the snaps in Week 14. He saw 81% of the team's expected running back fantasy points. He totaled 17.9 expected, which ranked 8th among running backs, and he scored 16.2. Which ranks 16th. So that's really good volume, really good production. He's basically a low-end RB1 for me, especially in a game that it looks like Pittsburgh's going to have to lean heavy on him through the air. It's where he scored 60% of his expected fantasy points last week. Again, had more receptions than rushing attempts in college. Pittsburgh's underdogs to the Patriots. Patriots have been getting sort of gashed to receiving running backs for 2 straight years now. Just everything is shaping up for a monster game for him, and he's not really priced like it. So I do like him quite a bit this week.
Yeah. Any other guys that you want for cheaper? Then we can go to the actual opportunity article here, Scott. I didn't forget it. Well, I kind of did, but we can obviously dive into it. Any other running backs that you guys have interest in, Scott or Tyler?
I want to say I like Dalvin too, though he's a tournament play. Possibly Jeff Wilson and vaguely Doug Martin.
All right, let's kind of go over now and talk about your actual opportunity article. Devin, if you could fire it up, I will show, part of the article here. And one thing that I thought that was interesting, you had Chris Godwin in there. So talk about your article and discuss it.
So I think by now everyone knows what this article is. It's my baby. Someone reached out to me on Twitter, Neil Ragland. He's won like $80,000, like seemingly every week. He like tweets me, "Hey, great article this week," and it's like another 20,000 win for him. But the heart of my research and all my articles comes from this, because volume is more important than production, or efficient, or more predictive than production, more important than efficiency. So really it looks at volume, and it has an accurate way of measuring it. A guy like Chris Godwin's the ultimate, bounce back candidate, sort of anti-recency bias play. He had 10 targets last week, which is great. Ranked as a wide receiver 1 in terms of expected fantasy points. Unfortunately, only one of those targets was actually catchable, and he caught it. But his volume has been amazing when Deshaun Jackson or Mike Evans have been out over the past 2 seasons. That's been 5 games. Looks like Jackson's going to be out again. But he averages 16.8 expected, 14.5 actual, 136 air yards, 8.8 targets, 1.4 end zone targets, 2.4 deep targets per game. That's easily, low end wide receiver 1 numbers. He does have a tough matchup this week, but you can tell me what the ownership looks like on him. But he is a guy I'm definitely considering this week. I talk about some other plays. Zeke, McCaffrey, Fournette, why I like them. Jalen Samuels, why I think he's chalky. Alvin Kamara, why he's hard to trust. Kenny Stills, why he's a DFS value. And you can scroll all the way to the bottom, and you'll notice the top values on both sites by recent expected fantasy points per game. Not always does that mean they're a good play, like Peyton Barber, Zay Jones, Tajay Sharp, Michael Gallup, yuck. But, they have been seeing good volume.
Yeah, and I have Chris Godwin's ownership here. Looking at FanDuel, we have him at 5%. People just aren't going to go back to him, right? It's just one of those things. He burned everyone. He was the chalk. Everyone on Twitter was so excited for Chris Godwin, including myself. Played him the week before. It was good times. And now that I got burned, I don't want to go back to it. And even the matchup against the Ravens is difficult, right?
Right. It really is.
Yeah.
But, it's the volume he's seeing at his price tag he's just, with that factored in, I think he's still very, very playable.
Yeah, and no one's ever I want to fire up against the Ravens defense. So I don't even see it getting over 5%. It's definitely interesting. And I saw that tweet on Twitter that you had of the guy that just keeps shipping all the money, man. That guy's just been winning every single week, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, he's putting together way better lineups than I am. So props to him.
Yeah.
But
well, definitely check out the opportunity cost article. Hey, listen, he's shipping money every single week, guys. It's not too late to get in on this. You guys obviously will have playoff stuff too. I've had some success in the playoff GPP, so check that out. Let's kind of move on over now and talk about the receiver position. Let's see. At the top, I remember, Tyler, you were looking at Juju. He's a guy that you like. Adam Thielen, who was the best wide receiver for the first 8 weeks of the season, and it feels like he's fallen off. And then, injured Odell Beckham Jr. will be back at it. So who's your favorite of these 3 studs and talk about?
I think it would be Juju on FanDuel. Yeah, on FanDuel specifically.
Both sides.
Both sides, to be honest. Yeah. He's just a great value on FanDuel where he's 13% of your budget versus DK where he's 16% of it. But either way, I want to play him. Stephon Gilmore's playing lights out football right now. He's our number 2 graded cornerback. He's expected to shout out Antonio Brown in this matchup. As such, I'll be going heavy on Juju at Big Ben stacks, trying to see that this will probably be the way the Steelers move the ball. The best way to attack New England is over the middle of the field, which is why I think that it's such a great stack here, as well as using Jalen Samuels and Vance McDonald. Guys that attack the center of the field against New England are the ones that I want to pursue this week. Juju leads the league in both targets and receptions over the middle of the field per Reeves' worksheet. He trails only Julio and Thielen in receiving yards and has the most targets among all players over the last 4 weeks. His pricing is easier on FanDuel, like I said, but I think he's a guy that I think you want a high exposure to, much more than the field.
Yeah, I agree with you. I guess we'll go to Scott real quick because I do want to ask you this question. What are you kind of doing with Juju? Because again, it sounds like you like him, but are you worried that he's the new number 1 in town and Bill Belichick just doubles him up? Because we know he likes to take away the number 1 weapon.
No, I don't think so. I don't think Belichick's willing to let himself get beat by Antonio Brown because he's had that happen to him before. But over the past 4 weeks, Smith-Schuster has had better volume. Last year, what did Belichick do? He did treat Brown like the wide receiver 1 and sold out to stop him. Brown only had 24 yards and 2 catches. Smith-Schuster caught 6 passes for 114. But New England struggled against slot wide receivers for a number of years now. They're giving up the 4th most fantasy points per game to slot wide receivers after giving up the most in 2017, the 4th most in 2016. Maybe it is Brown, so maybe get some exposure, but I don't think so. I think Smith-Schuster's the best play of the slate.
Yeah, I agree. Now that we're done talking about Juju and how great of a play he is, I think a lot of people are going to be on him, but there is reason, obviously, if Antonio Brown does get 5% ownership or something crazy like that, it's definitely something that we can talk about when we get to the tournament segment. But let's go back to you, Tyler. You didn't get a chance to talk about Thielen and Odell Beckham, and I want you to be able to rant about them and how great of plays they could be this week, so talk about them.
We mentioned earlier that the Vikings fired their offensive coordinator. I think it makes a lot of sense for his replacement to go back to what worked early in the season, targeting Thielen relentlessly. Xavier Howard, if he plays, should line up mostly against Stephon Diggs, leaving Thielen with the softer cornerback matchups in Bobby McCain and Minka Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick has performed pretty well in the slot, but McCain is our number 91 graded cornerback. His quarterback rating allowed is nearly twice of what Fitzpatrick has allowed, and those are the targets that we want. Julian Edelman went for 9 for 86 and a touchdown, and Zay Jones went for 4 for 67 and 2 touchdowns over the past 2 weeks against this team. And I think we're going to see a lot of success here for Thielen in the slot here against the Dolphins. Big fantasy outing potential for him. And Odell Beckham, monitor his practice participation, but if he gets the green light, he's got a quality matchup here as well. Tennessee is allowing the 5th most fantasy points opposing wide receivers. No stranger to allowing big outings to players with speed. We've seen field stretchers like T.Y. Hilton, Kenny Stills, Will Fuller, and Tyrell Williams all go for 100-plus yards and a touchdown against them. Beckham isn't a world-class sprinter, but he knows how to set up a DB and get behind him. Wouldn't be shocked at all if he finishes this game with 100 and a score. And, the Titans are going to be trying to be playing for a playoff spot, as I mentioned earlier. Wouldn't be surprising to see the Giants try to play the role of spoiler.
All right, let's go over to you, Scott, and talk about some of the guys that you're interested in at the wide receiver position. I see at the top, besides Juju, who's like your absolute lock, you got T.Y. Hilton, who did me great last week, Amari Cooper, who I think is going to be a chalky option, and you do also like the Thielen-Diggs combo for the Vikings because it seems like it's going to be a get-right spot where they just kind of attack that passing game. So what are you doing at the top tier besides Juju?
I like Thielen and Diggs. I think it's tough to pick specifically one of them. Amari Cooper still mispriced, I think, especially so on FanDuel. Since he's come to Dallas, he ranks second among wide receivers in fantasy points per game. Volume hasn't been as good, but production's certainly there, which makes him very mispriced. T.Y. Hilton, pretty good matchup, good volume, always in play for tournaments. And sticking with this Pittsburgh-New England game, you have to like Julian Edelman, who's just been so productive, maybe more of a cash play than a tournament play, but so productive since returning from suspension, good volume. And Pittsburgh is a slot funnel defense. They rank bottom 5 in fantasy points per game to slot wide receivers. And I think top 5 to outside wide receivers. So it just makes sense that New England would lean heavy on him this week. And then there's a number of value plays I like. I don't know if you want me to get into that just now.
Dive into the value plays. Talk about the guys that you're really interested in.
Kenny Stills. So he's seen really good volume production over the past 2 weeks. I don't think that's a coincidence that came after complaining about a lack of targets. Curtis Samuel has an ideal matchup this week. He's also seeing good volume, good production, back-to-back 80-plus yard games with 8 or more targets. And New Orleans is giving up the most fantasy points per game to right wide receivers. That's where he spends just about 50% of his time. Also, the most schedule-adjusted fantasy points per game to wide receiver 2s, which he is now because of DJ Moore. Chris Godwin, we talked about, I like. And then just like other vaguely sort of in play guys I don't want to spend too much time on. You make a case for Randall Cobb, Larry Fitzgerald, Kiki Kuti based on slot matchups. Same too for Tyler Boyd, but don't really love those guys. Do think still Samuel and Godwin are the best of those value plays we were talking about.
All right, Tyler, talk about some of the value plays that you have interesting because it seems like you got some similar takes as Scott, but you got a couple guys who are a little bit different as well.
Yeah, I'll touch on the guys that are different here. We both like Hilton and Amari. Tyler Boyd's a guy that's really interesting to me this week. So we have to make some stands on terrible slates, and one that I'm doing is the Raiders-Bengals game. I want to play this one with quite a bit of volume. Boyd has seen decent volume with Driscoll under center, 8 and 6 targets, but it's the matchup here against Oakland that intrigues me the most, considering how bad they are on defense. In week 13, AJ Green ran 10 routes before he got taken out due to injury. Boyd finished that game running 88% of his routes from the slot. The next week, in week 14, he didn't run a single slot route. So it's very interesting to see how the Bengals offensive group does with Boyd in week 15, whether or not they want to try to attack the Raiders via the slot. That's where they're the most vulnerable. Slot cornerback Nick Nelson would be our lowest graded cornerback if he had enough snaps to qualify. I'm just really at a loss right now to figure out where they line up Boyd this week, considering that he didn't run a single slot route last week. I don't know if you know anything about that, Scott, but it's something that's something I wanted to dig into a bit more prior to kickoff.
What's that?
About Tyler Boyd playing mostly on the perimeter now.
Oh, yeah. I thought he was still slot, but I didn't double check, so that's a good call.
Yeah, it's something to look into. The other guy I'm kind of interested in is Corey Davis. I mean, his volume's been really poor over the last few weeks, but again, they've had that huge lopsided game last week where they didn't really need to pass at all. Should bounce back here against the Giants, where they need to win to keep their playoff hopes alive. They're currently 2.5-point dogs. Should be passing heavy in that game script. He's another volatile wide receiver option. I think he needs to hit pay dirt, though, to kind of pay off and warrant any kind of rostering. It's kind of a rough week at wide receiver, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in that Tyler Boyd news because I've been playing him like all season long. It's been really good times. Every time I played him, it's worked out. So hopefully Tyler Boyd could be a really interesting tournament guy. Still mad that he got hurt that 1 week because I had him at 0.6% owned and he was absolutely crushing. But any other wide receivers you guys want to talk about that we missed? I know you got a couple dart throws. Scott, you want to discuss those?
By the way, it looks like Boyd played 79, then 88, then 55% of his snaps from the slot. So, it does look like a reduction, might just be a one-off thing, but, that's still enough for him to take advantage of what is a good matchup. I said Boyd's vaguely in play. Allen Robinson, Corey Davis, too, is a guy I spent some time on. Giants can't stop wide receiver ones, but, Corey Davis, man, he keeps burning me. It's not even really a matchup thing, it looks like. And Tajay Sharp and Taywan Taylor are really good values. And I think all three are just kind of vaguely in play and don't really like any of them, to be honest. I get what you're saying about it's a tough wide receiver week, especially because we're trying to pay down because we like the expensive running backs. But that's really all I got. Juju Smith-Schuster looks like my lock right now. Do like Edelman, Amari, T.Y., and then of the value, Stills, Curtis Samuel, Chris Godwin.
Yeah, Stills feels like one of the guys you talked about in your opportunity article that's going to be in that lineup that guy's just going to ship all the money with. Seems like a guy that's not a bad tournament play. Speaking of tournaments, I want to dive in and talk about the tournaments. Yahoo's got a really awesome contest. I don't know if you guys saw it. We talked about it a little bit before the show. I know Devin's excited. I'm excited. I'm sure you guys are too. If you haven't heard of it, it's a 10-entry max. They're giving away, I believe, $250K in just free rake. The thing will not fill as well, so there'll be even more just free money going around that we can, take. And it's $100K up top to first in a really flat payout structure. I think second place might be $50K. Third is $30K. It's just a really, really awesome contest. So let's kind of talk about some tournaments. I know if Scott's playing that, Scott, you're going to be playing the Big Ben, the Samuels, Juju Smith-Schuster, and you're going to run it back with Julian Edelman. Am I correct?
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a bad idea at all. Let's see. Yeah, also Gronkowski's kind of in play. We could talk about him a little bit later. But yeah, Edelman, Brady, Roethlisberger, Juju Smith-Schuster, and maybe a little bit of Gronk. Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Can't trust the running backs with Rex Burkhead back. And Jalen Samuels, of course, feeling very lockish. Reminds me of last year or 2 years ago. The entire Pittsburgh game stack just kept winning money, where it was like Ben, Bell, 1 to 2 receivers, and the defense somehow just all coming together. But yeah, so I really do like that game again. And just to reiterate my point, so the over under is 51.5. The next closest main slate over under is 46.5. Which is the same difference between them and that's the Baltimore game, and the third worst game of the slate, which is Houston at Jets, which has a 41.5 point over under. So really there's just like a massive difference in my eyes, between this game and everything else. And I'll have to look at projected ownership. I know your site does a good job with that. My site does it too. But as it looks right now, I just think that's the game to go sort of all in on.
Now, Tyler, I'm sure you're going to have exposure to this game, but I'm going to give you the difficult task. Talk about the rest. Like, because in tournaments, right, everyone's going to be saying, hey, I'm going to be stacking up the Patriots and Steelers game. I just feel like everyone's going to have exposure to it. I'm not saying you can't play guys in that game. I think the tournament approach that I'm personally going to take is not as much game stacking that game, but just getting pieces, right? Maybe at least every team has at least one pair or has two or three, just not going all the way with the quarterback, because there's just so many, different variations, outcomes that quarterbacks can have. So I want you to really dive in and talk about some of these other games. Which ones are more appealing as game stacks?
So what's great about Yahoo is they include the Sunday night football game. And we've got the Rams versus the Nick Foles-led Eagles. I'm talking Rams onslaughts here. This is what I'm looking at. It's going to cost a lot of your money, but you can get a piece of the Steelers game. Jalen Samuels, only $16 on Yahoo. Those are the cheap pieces you need. Maybe like Vance McDonald, introduce him as well. Those are cheap pieces that you can get part of that 52-point game that we want to target. But I love the idea of going with some heavy Rams here. Other games that I think are worth stacking up are the Cowboys and Colts. That's a game I'm really interested in. I've mentioned the Raiders, Bengals quite a few times. I'm trying to think of a contrarian one, and it's tough, man. Maybe some Vikings onslaughts against Miami.
Yeah, you guys, we all kind of like talked about the Vikings and having interest in them, having a resurgence. Here's one maybe you might be interested in, Tyler, and it's not pretty, but you talked about two of these guys as studs you like. You like Barkley. You like Odell Beckham. Run it back with Eli Manning. That's never a pretty thing to do, but you can obviously simply just put Corey Davis in there as a guy to run it back with, and that's an easy four-man stack.
It's tough, man. A 43-point total. It's a rough week. It really is. You're going to need to make some stretches here, but I think this is a week where if you do a bit more research than everyone else, it could really pay off tenfold considering the chalk. There isn't much chalk to go around.
Yeah, and I think if you do kind of just, do your own research, dive in really deep, you're just going to have your own contrarian approach, and you don't have to just go really wonky and do some crazy things. Does anyone have any interest? Here's a game that I thought, when I first saw it, and again, it doesn't have a high total. It's in like the 44, 43 range. It's Seattle and the Niners, and, we played some value Niners, and we'll obviously get the Kittle, who's a great tight end play, but Russell Wilson's been super efficient, and there's a little bit of a funnel there with the Niners, so any interest in maybe some Niners exposure, Scott?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Carson's vaguely in play. I do like Tyler Lockett. He's just been insanely efficient all year. Doug Baldwin's day-to-day. But I don't know. Probably not. Did mention that Oakland-Cincinnati game, but even that is there's not really a lot of names to like. Yeah, I don't know. You guys kind of know my thoughts on this. Hopefully there's going to be like really bad false weather concerns or something to get people off of this Pittsburgh New England game, but we'll see.
Well, Tyler brought up a good point, right? That Eagles Rams game is still on there, so maybe that'll
on Yahoo, yeah,
on Yahoo, yeah. And tournaments obviously, but I'm talking Yahoo because I think that's super interesting and going to be basically a tournament that's talked about a lot throughout the industry this week. But I did want to ask you this because I know Tyler touched on the Rams side and going onslaught. But if we do play Nick Foles and we do play the Eagles, what do we play it with? That's kind of the issue. And I really don't like playing Eagles too much. So, Scott, what are you kind of doing with the Eagles side?
But by the way, I do think it is a really good get right spot for Goff, and all of the Rams wide receivers are very in play this week. But on the Eagles side, I think it's really only Ertz. We have a decent sample of Ertz games by now, and it really does look like Ertz is the top guy for Foles, and decent production there, best volume on the team. So I guess he's the guy to play, but I haven't really spent too much time with it.
Yeah, I totally get it. All these like 50 totals are not on the slate, right? We got Eagles, Rams not on the slate. We got Saints, Panthers not on the slate. And then we also have that Chiefs, Chargers game, the 50 total not on the slate. So it's definitely a weird week. Any other takes, Tyler, from these games? I know you had interest in the Cowboys-Colts game. Any ways that you want to stack that one up?
I just like that Hilton and Cooper, they're both $23. I did want to mention that, so thank you for bringing it up. Those are both pretty good values for this week, considering the volume that both these guys are seeing and their ceilings. It's fun. Like, I love that this tournament is a 10 entry max, where we're not going to see 150 entries here. People are limited to what they can do. So I don't know, have fun with it.
Yeah,
it's going to be a good one.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, guys like GPP Brit, man, get out of here. We don't want your 150 lineups. I'm kind of like a single or like to 5 lineup guy. And I'm really excited for this tournament. I'm firing 10 in there, and it should be a really good time. Makes sense to do the Cowboys side, right? They're rolling right now. Go a little Dak Prescott, Zeke with Cooper. We just know how much like the targets are funneled there, and then just run it back with Hilton. I think that makes a ton of sense there. Or even Eric Ebron, because he's a guy that we can talk about here, moving in the tight end. And Ebron, Kittle, they're both phenomenal plays. It seems like we're in agreement that they are the top tight ends on this slate. Scott, kick us off. What are you doing at the tight end position?
So I think that's exactly right. It's just everyone knows what the plays are, and it's George Kittle and Eric Ebron with Ertz off the slate, except for Yahoo and Travis Kelce off the slate as well. I also kind of like Austin Hooper, who's sort of a value based on recent volume. Also with Julio Jones expected to be shadowed by Patrick Peterson. But Hooper does have a few double-digit target games this year. Don't really see a massive ceiling from him, but he is a slight value. Though really, I think I'm going to have like 90% exposure to either Kittle or Ebron. They're just both still relative values, and the edge they give you over any other tight end is just massive. Kittle's arguably having the best, or I should say most efficient tight end season I've ever seen in terms of yards per route run, yards after the catch per reception. And then he's on pace to set the all-time single season tight end record in terms of yardage. And then Eric Ebron, leading all receivers and touchdowns. It's just, and they're both not priced like that. So I think I'm really going to have heavy exposure to both those guys.
Yeah, one thing I also like about that little narrative there with Kittle getting all those yards is Kyle Shanahan was kind of pissed at himself because he was like, man, dude, I didn't get you like the receiving yards in a game record. So you better believe he's going to make sure he pours it on with Kittle. And
we'll give him 2 touchdowns. That's my prediction.
There we go. 2 touchdowns for Kittle. Yeah, that sounds awesome to me. Tyler, you're probably agreeing the same thing here. Kittle, Ebron, are you just going to go all in on those guys, or anyone else make you kind of interested?
No, I think I'm going to spread out my tight end exposure this week. I don't think Kittle is a must play, but I definitely agree he's a very, very strong play. Ebron's just another guy. It's so hard to fade. He's seeing so many targets. He leads all tight ends in targets over the past 3 weeks. The Cowboys have allowed the second most targets to opposing tight ends. Hard to fade him as well. If you're looking down at cheaper guys, Jared Cook's another guy. He's just about the only Raider that you can play with confidence. Coming off back-to-back 100-yard outings, he's scored in 3 of his last 4 games. Takes on the Bengals, who ranks top 10 in most fantasy points allowed to the position. Vance McDonald's another guy that I kind of have some vague interest in. Tight ends have fared rather well against New England this year. Their slow linebackers make it easy for both tight ends and running backs to get receptions underneath. Vance hasn't seen a ton of targets lately, which is a bit concerning, but we're seeing the highest game of the week, and that's kind of what we're targeting with tight ends, guys that have touchdown potential. Vance definitely has that because the Patriots have allowed the 5th most touchdowns to opposing tight ends in the year. And then down at the very bottom, Anthony Firkser for the Titans is a guy that I'm interested in. He's seen limited snaps, but he's hauled in 16 of 16 targets for 202 yards and a score. Was hyper productive at Harvard when given an opportunity. If he had enough snaps to qualify, he'd currently be PFF's number 13 tight end when sorted by receiving. So the guy's just been playing lights out to start. Giants have allowed opposing tight ends an 80% catch rate over the last 10 games. DK and FanDuel are a little bit onto this. They don't have him priced at the Stoneman, but he is bottom barrel over at Yahoo where he's $10.
Yeah, well, we do know this is a Harvard approved show. So we like Ryan Fitzpatrick on this show. We like Anthony Firkser, it sounds like, too. We got to get on out of here, though. Before we go, though, I just want to drop the Yahoo code for us. Just so you know, if you want to sign up, there is a first-time deposit matching bonus of $30 with the promo code Grinders30. So, again, it is Grinders30. Get on that Yahoo contest, guys. It's going to be a good time. It's $20 entry, $200 altogether if you want to max enter it. And I suggest doing that. It should be a lot of fun. Any final thoughts for us? Scott, Tyler, anything else you want to give the people before we get on out of here?
Not really, but we miss you, Britt. You did a good job, Trevor. That's it from me.
Hey, Trevor, did you do that on purpose? It's Travis. I don't know if you did that on purpose.
Payback.
Oh, you got the
shade back.
Man, throwing the shade at me. It's all good though. But hey, man, maybe Bert won't come back. Maybe he'll be stuck on a Disney cruise and lost forever. Maybe he'll be stuck with me again. So we gotta get on out of here, those guys. There is a show following us. So for me, Trevor, for Scott and Tyler, we are gone.